start recording our session. There we go. Okay, so again, welcome. We are going to be recording this session. I've just started the recording just so everybody's aware. Again, this is our first Parent University event of the 2021 school year. We will be hosting a Parent University night at the end of each month, so the last Wednesday of each month. Unless it falls on a holiday, and we'll do it a little bit earlier. So we are excited tonight to offer our first one in this series. Tonight's Parent University is called Personal Internet Security Tips, Internet Safety at Home, with our parent, Sean McKeever, who is also a security professional. So we are so excited, Mr. McKeever, and thankful that you volunteered to put this whole thing together for us. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and just let me know when I need to click ahead.
Okay, will do. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad I could put this together for everybody. I will take questions as we go, but if you could use the chat for those questions. Jeffrey will kind of moderate that, and if we don't get to it during the presentation, we will have time for questions and answers at the end. Okay. All right, next slide, please. All right, so just a quick table of contents, got a quick introduction, and then we'll just dive right into the stuff. We've got a couple problems that we're trying to understand. Identity protection, home networking, monitoring your kids online, and then just some best practices. Next slide, please. Okay, so introduction, why am I here? Sean McKeever, I go by Dork Vader on Twitter. I've been on the internet since 1993, so I've seen most of it. I've been a InfoSec and cybersecurity professional for just over 10 years now. Did a stint in digital rights management for a very large chemical company, and then worked in enterprise information security, and I'm currently working on connected vehicle cybersecurity. So things like smartphone apps that talk to vehicles and telematics systems and back-end things like that. Picture there of me is at DEF CON playing with one of my robots, and the little computer in the lower right-hand corner of the presentation. It's actually my first computer ever, which was a TI 994A. I got it in 1983. So yeah, don't panic. I've tried to provide actionable items here. This isn't a fear-based session. I'm trying to give people things they can act on. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with identity protection, and this really covers, what gets out on the internet and how that can be used for good or for bad. First point, once something's on the internet, it's always there. Then we'll look at some social media stuff, and then just generic publicly available information. So if we go to the next one. So I'm calling out the Streisand effect here. This happened a while ago now. Some of you may have heard about it. They had a South Park episode about it. But that picture there is of Barbara Streisand's house in California, on the coast of the ocean, and the Pacific Ocean. Yes, that's that one. And somebody had taken a picture and posted it on the internet, and Barbara Streisand found out there was a picture of her house and sued to have it removed. The unfortunate side effect of that was the picture became famous. So her attempts to remove it from the internet just made it more widespread. And it's a kind of a case study on how once you put something on the internet, you can't really get rid of it anymore. So the thoughts behind that are, make sure you're educating your kids about what they post online. People have been denied jobs or university admissions due to things that have been found on the internet that they posted or said. And to support that, I like to limit publicly available information, things like your hometown or where you work, wedding anniversaries, birth dates. These can all be used in an attempt to impersonate you, either to another company or credit agency, etc. This one I think is fairly important. Post about your vacations after you return. You know, things can get spread on Facebook a lot faster than you think they can, or a lot further than you expect them to. And if you're posting vacation pictures while you're gone and somebody can figure out something about, you know, figure out where you live, well, then they might know that your house is empty for a couple of days because you're in Barbados or something like that. And along those lines, be particular about who you share that information with. You know, I have a fairly tight set of security on my social media that supports it. And the sites that don't support it, like say Twitter, I don't post those kinds of things there. And honestly, the people I interact with on Twitter probably don't care because they're not really, for the most part, close personal friends. They're more colleagues and people I know through work in the security industry. And then just finally, assume anything you post is public, even if you've taken efforts to not have it be public. I made some posts to a mailing list in 2001, and then found them later publicly available because I didn't realize that this email list was posting a digest to a website. Those, yay. Okay, go sit down over there, please. Thank you. So, you know, just think about what you're saying and where you're posting it, and just assume that once you've said it, it's there. And then I have a point here. Since we all live in Michigan, it's trivial to find a home address for a registered voter. So, you know, supporting that where you can, don't use your real name or tell people enough specifics to know where you live. I'll have some more information about that later. Excuse me for 1 second.
While he's paused right now, if you do have questions as we go slide by slide, Mr. McKeever is going to take questions along the way. So we don't have to save all questions to the end. So feel free to post to the chat if you have questions about anything specific as we go. He's going to give you a lot of information tonight, but he's also going to be available for questions.
And I do have my contact information at the end. So if you don't want to speak up now, you can contact me later. Okay, and then finally, this is very important for kids playing video games, and not just from a creepy adult trying to talk to kids, but especially with teenagers, they don't quite understand the implications of some of their behaviors, and it have been instances of online behavior spilling over into the real world with real world consequences. So, you know, make sure you talk to your kids about what they're saying, who they're saying it to, and what they should and shouldn't be sharing with people. Because they think they're their friends, but they don't really necessarily know the difference. Okay? Next slide, please. So I was talking a lot about social media, and in support of that, you know, it's great for staying connected with people. I've got friends who live in different countries, different parts of this country, and we don't talk that much. So, you know, it's nice to have that dialogue, but it can also be used for highly targeted scams and fraud. So, you know, as I said earlier, limit what you post publicly. Again, that depends on the platform. For instance, anything you post on Twitter, for the most part, it is available. So, you know, posting about that new job or that new car, well, anybody can find that if they know what your username is. And, you know, decide for yourself how much exposure is right for you, you know, hometown, education, that could all be used. But if you're very diligent about what you're using for like your security question answers, then maybe it doesn't matter so much. Profile pictures, they're, you know, good and bad. You know, they let people know who you are, but they've also been used to link identities across platforms. These pictures at the bottom of the presentation here are not only silly, they're examples of my most recent Facebook user pictures for the most part. You guys can all see me here. You wouldn't necessarily be able to pick me out of a crowd based on what I've had on Facebook lately. Phone numbers, home addresses, credit card information absolutely should be kept private. And social media is obviously not that. So I've gone to great lengths to not share my phone number or my address with Facebook. My location on Facebook is completely wrong. It's not even the right continent. And I've had friends who've used their credit card on Facebook for like a charitable donation, and then later found that they're getting billed for something against that credit card. So be very careful. And one of the things I do just specifically with credit cards in general is I funnel as much of that through my PayPal account as I can. I'm not saying PayPal is perfect, but at least PayPal is the only or one of the only entities that has my banking information. So if I'm buying something from a small Etsy store or on eBay, I run that through PayPal instead of putting my credit card information there directly. Okay, next slide, please. So I mentioned Facebook. This is actually a screenshot of my current information. As I said, I claim to live in Gotham. Unfortunately, this was the only Gotham I could find on Facebook in the United Kingdom. I couldn't find one in the US, so that's where I live. I claim to have studied prehistoric archaeology at Miskatonic University. That's not a real place. And you can see here, none of these resolve to anything, right? My birthday I was clearly not born in January of 1919. And I don't even go as far as telling people what language I speak, because if they don't know me, I'm not really interested in engaging with them on Facebook anyways. Okay, next slide. So social login is a feature that most social media platforms support today. It can be nice because you don't have to manage multiple passwords for a website. So you can just sign in with your Google account or your Facebook account. But there are ramifications to that, because now you're funneling your activity on that third-party site through the identity provider, which would be Facebook or Twitter or whomever. So keep that in mind. If you are going to use that for like a third-party app, the original identity provider knows that you're using that app and likely everything you do in it. And there's not much transparency with these, so treat it as such. Again, you're the only one who can judge what's right, what's the right risk for you, but think through it and maybe just use a local password, as I have in this window down here. I don't remember what this is a screenshot of, but this is a sign on for some website. So if you have a different username and password on each site, it's harder to follow you around should those credentials get exposed in something like a breach. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to move into some more technical stuff here. I've got a lot of information on these slides, but I'm not going to drain them. Number one, I don't want to bore everyone to death and exercise my super nerd brain. And number two, it's a lot deeper than this, but I'm trying to at least represent it here so that if you look at it later and you want something to follow up on, you have a reference there. So we'll move on to the next slide, which is Wi-Fi. Yeah, so Wi-Fi, I'm using it right now. There's probably a dozen devices in my house on the home Wi-Fi. So a couple tips: just change your network name. Comcast and Wide Open West and AT&T all like to ship their devices with a standard name like ArisNet or Xfinity Wi-Fi, and that can give hackers a pretty quick understanding of what kind of default security your network has on it. So just change it to something silly like Bob's Burgers or Backyard Barbecue. Anything. The name itself isn't important. It's just slightly obscures what it is and may make it harder for bad guys. And I like to say, when you're dealing with hackers, you don't have to be the most secure. You just have to be more secure than your neighbors, which is kind of pessimistic. But ultimately, if somebody's trying to be malicious, they're going to go after the easiest target. And if you've taken some basic steps, you're no longer an easy target. In supporting that, use a complicated encryption key, at least 12 characters long. I like to use just a phrase, something that I know that's easy enough to repeat. Like the lyrics to a song or an opening sentence, like "it was a dark and stormy night." Those spaces and the proper capitalization, that all makes it a lot harder to crack. The one I have here is Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, mostly because I wanted to see if I could say that out But that would actually be a fairly strong passphrase and would take somebody quite a long time to brute force. If you do have an older computer, most of the older model versions of the wireless standards are fairly insecure, but doesn't mean you can't use the computer. I meant to have a visual aid, but I don't. I apologize, but they do sell Wi-Fi dongles or just USB drive looking things. They're very small. They're usually $10 to $20 on Amazon, and that will bring your wireless security up to modern standards. 4 and 5, these are more specific things. If you're interested in them, they're here in the presentation. You can Google them later and look into them if there's something you think you want to do, but I'm not going to dig into those for now. Next slide, please. IoT, the Internet of Things. And when we say IoT, we're talking things like Alexa or Google Home, Siri, or your television or your home stereo if it has a network connection on it. The cheaper the thing, the less security they did on it. So if you're buying a $5 internet camera off of Amazon or Alibaba, it probably doesn't have great security. And once you hook that up to your network, your entire network has inherited the security of that device. So, just Google it for some reviews or some, articles about the device and see what other people have experienced with it. Hackers get bored easy. So a lot of them will buy these cheap things and just pick them apart and see what they can find. So if it does have a vulnerability and it's been around for more than a couple months, it's probably already been found and posted about. So, if you're considering something like that, just Google it. I do have a smart TV. I do have a connected stereo, but they're not on my network. I have an Apple TV, which is the extent of my IoT devices here. And that's because I have more confidence in Apple than I do the manufacturers of my home electronics. If you want to do some DIY IoT stuff, there's a lot of Raspberry Pi projects where you can do your own stuff and maybe learn a little bit about the security and pay a lot less money for it. And then if you are going to have a bunch of IoT stuff, maybe set up a separate wireless network for just those things. That way, if one of them does get compromised, it doesn't spill over to your computers and your phones and your tablets. And then finally, and I just did this as this meeting was starting, apply updates. I just updated the OS on this phone. Those updates are important. As things break, they get fixed usually pretty quickly.
Mr. McKeever, could you give us a few more examples of IoT type devices? I know you said Alexa. What are some other examples that people might know?
One of the most popular is the Philips Hue light bulbs. They're light bulbs with a little computer in them, and you can use them to change the lighting in your house. So they have a range of colors. You can turn them on remotely or off remotely. Some of them have audio sensors, so they can flash with with sound and things like that, and make your house into a little party place. The Nest thermostat and smoke detectors are also IoT devices. Anything that has an interface, be that via a smartphone or a web page, is considered an IoT device. Cars are becoming IoT devices, cars are IoT devices at this point. The majority of the vehicles being sold in the US are connected to the internet now. So they have the same inherent security structures as anything else on the internet now, and have to be protected in the same way. I've even seen, like a Samsung refrigerator, coffee makers, a blender. I don't know why you would want your blender on the internet, but people are putting anything on the internet they can think of. So it's probably been done. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. So along those lines, home routers, if your router, and in a lot of cases, your router is provided by your internet provider. I opt to disable that and use my own because I'm a giant nerd. But if it is older, whether it's your own or you've gotten it from your internet provider, you should probably upgrade it. The performance, number one, is going to be a lot better. Your network speed is going to increase, and the security modes that it supports will be more secure. Change the username and password. They've gotten a lot better with this over the last 5 or 6 years, where they're no longer, especially Comcast and the internet providers, are not shipping them with default usernames and passwords anymore. There's usually a sticker on it, but at least change the password anyways. If you're technically inclined, you should probably upgrade the firmware on that device twice a year, maybe more, depending on what it is. And check for remote administration and stuff. The last two, 4 and 5, again, they're fairly technical, but you can Google your device name and remote administration or universal plug and play and find an article that somebody's written on how to deal with those things. You know, and I have a tip here: don't let the jargon scare you. If you hear UPnP or MQTT or TCP/IP, Google it. Wikipedia explains all this stuff away for you. And don't be intimidated by it. I will be completely honest with you. If I can do it, so can you. You know, it's just taking the time to understand it.
We have a chat question. I think this might, you addressed it a little bit in later slides, or it may be a district question, Sean, but Trina had a question. Is there a way to shut off like YouTube or like Amazon, Target shopping sites when the kids are on their Chromebooks at home, like doing the schoolwork? So one of the things some of the kids are doing right is switching over to sites they shouldn't be on because they're not connected to the school network, which has different blockage and that kind of thing. So do you have any advice for parents on that?
There's a couple different levels, and I do have some stuff later in the presentation. And Trina, you actually can reach out to me. You have my contact information already, so I can share it with you if you need to leave. You can filter it at the network level. You can filter it at the device level. If they're on a school Chromebook, it does fall to the school district to enforce block lists or access lists.
Can that work when you guys are at home and they're not connected to our network at school? So that was one of the other questions that has come up.
Yes, it can. I have my personal Chromebooks configured that anything that I've not explicitly said they can go to, they have to request it. And by default, it blocks it. So if they try to go to Amazon, if they get a block notice and it says, it has a request button, and I get an email through my Google account saying, James has requested access to Amazon. Do you want to allow that or not? Excuse me 1 second.
Yep. So one of the things I can tell everybody, and he's talking about on their personal devices, these are some of the questions that will come up tonight. Well, I'll bring back to the district tech as well about using the district devices on home networks. Later in the presentation, we'll have a few other things for parents on personal devices.
Okay, great. We can move on to the next slide then. So this falls right under that, monitoring your kids' online behavior. And my best advice is use the tools you have. Understand the parental controls on your devices. I've got an iPhone, I've got an Android right here, I'm on a Windows computer, my kids use Chromebooks. They all have some sort of parental control interface. Chromebooks are essentially big Android computers, and there is a feature that they've implemented called Family Link. So I have the parent account, and then all of the accounts that my children use are part of that Family Link. So they don't have rights under that to install specific things or go to specific sites. They have to request that access, and I can either approve it or deny it. And it's very simple. It just sends me an email with a button that I can click yes or no, and that's that. Apple has a very similar thing, but they've, of course, being Apple, made it confusing when it was originally simple. It's now part of Screen Time. So if you go to Screen Time under iOS, there's a list of things you can turn on and off. So you could disable SMS entirely, so they can't send text messages. You can disable Safari or any other app that's on the device so they can't use it, or you can set restrictions that they can only use it for a specific amount of time. You can also limit the types of websites. You're kind of relying on them being Google or Apple, to have an accurate list of appropriate websites, but they do have functionality for that. Microsoft offers a similar control under Windows called a family group. You all have to have accounts with Microsoft.com. Again, you create a parent account and then create sub-accounts for your children, and then it will enforce similar behavior on a Windows PC that's logged in to Microsoft.com. And so my final bullet point here is, keep it social. My kids right now, I asked them to leave because they were being loud, but for the most part, iPad time, computer time, we do in the family areas of the house, so that I have a rough idea of what they're doing. I'm not looking over their shoulder the whole time, but I can hear the types of videos they're watching or the types of games they're playing, or if they're talking to somebody on the internet, what they're talking about. And I think that really is the best tool when you can use it. I understand you can't always be there under every circumstance, but kids are smart, and every tool you come up with to try and control them, they will probably find a way around it. So, talk to them, explain why you do and don't want them to do things, and be open and honest with them, and tell them they can ask you when they have questions, right? Because that's the best way to ensure they're being safe, is, trusting them and working with them so that they have the right tools to cope with it. So I see a couple things. Family Link doesn't seem to work when I brought our own Chromebooks, even with, yes. So because they're logged into the school district account instead of their personal account, your Family Link settings will not work. Those rules fall to the district account then. So yeah, there's several questions about Family Link, and yeah, that's only for personal things. Once you've logged into the Ferndale Schools account on an Android device, the permissions being applied to them are based on what the school has set up. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, we'll move into some best practices, and this is just kind of me preaching. I'm sure you've probably heard most of this already, but hopefully I got some ideas in here that folks will find useful. So we'll talk about passwords first, everyone's favorite topic, and then patches again, and then some prevention. So passwords, again, the longer they are, the better. Dictionary words, even really long ones like Constantinople or Kalamazoo, things like birthdays, anniversaries, names, those things are all very easy to just brute force and break without even really knowing anything about the account. There's a little comic strip here that goes through some permutations of a password to try and do it, but mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, punctuation marks, adding things out of order or flipping things. Those will all break brute force attempts. Now, obviously, if somebody has hacked the provider and stolen their password database and unencrypted it, then none of this matters, which is why point number 2, use a password manager. At the time that I wrote this, I had 167 accounts in my personal password manager. That was 2.5 weeks ago. I've already added another 10 accounts to that list. There's no way I could keep up with those passwords. I don't try. So I have a password manager with a very complex password that is unique to that and not used anywhere else. I use 1Password. 1Password is free, but if you want to be able to use it across multiple devices, there is a small monthly fee. I'm not paid by them, but I do know they're a head nerd, and I trust him with my passwords. KeePass and PWSafe are free options. They don't offer syncing, so you would have to have access to the device where your passwords are stored if you want to look them up. But I have used them, and the nice thing is they are completely offline. So if you don't have access to the device the password is stored on, you don't have access to the password.
You muted.
I bumped my space bar, sorry. Yeah, multi-factor authentication, also called MFA or 2FA or two-factor authentication, it just enhances that. So it's not just logging in with a username and password. You'll get a text message on your device saying, hey, did you really want to log into that account? Or there's an application called Google Authenticator that wants a password, I'm not going to do it right now, that generates an access token every time you try to log into a site that you have to provide to that site to get logged in. It takes a little bit of effort to set them up, but on important things like bank accounts or you know, social media, if you have a large social media following, or YouTube, you know, it's a little bit of prevention that can save a lot of headache. You know, earlier this year, February, there was a rash of YouTubers getting hacked because they were reusing passwords and they didn't have MFA turned on. And for a couple of days, they lost complete access to their channels, and people were able to post things on their behalf, which wound up in them getting banned. And that's doesn't seem like a big deal, but that's how those people make their money. They post videos to YouTube. And if someone is out there posting inappropriate things to their channel, it's impacting their ability to do that. So I'm going to be completely honest. I don't use it everywhere. I only use it where I think I need it. And then the fourth point, lie on your password reset questions. And this is a little non-conventional. Sometimes it feels bad about lying, but the computer doesn't know that your dog's name isn't Jeep Cherokee or, you know, Neil Gaiman. And the computer also doesn't care that that's not your dog's name. As long as you remember that that's what you told that site your dog's name is, that will work. And using a different answer on every site also makes it harder. And this comes into play, especially with online banking and telecom companies. There have been a lot of attacks where people have impersonated people because they figured out these things through social engineering or whatnot, and then can call up the phone company and go, hey, I'm going to go on a trip. Can you forward my phone for the next 3 days to this number? And then they can, you know, impersonate that person more reliably because they're actually getting the phone calls that that person should be getting. The password managers I've mentioned here all have fields that will support this, or at least a notes section. So you can record that information along with your username and password so that if you do need them, you have them and you don't forget what lies you told. And then change your passwords. I know you've probably all heard this a million times. I know you have to do it at work. I know it's a huge pain. But it's a lot easier to do with a password manager. Hang on 1 second, please. I know one password at least will remind you how old your passwords are and that you should change them. Excuse me for 1 second. All right. Okay. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Oh, and I do see one thing in the chat about saving passwords. I opt to not do that. That's my personal choice, but I don't trust a web browser to store my information securely. I do use biometrics on my mobile devices, but I do not store passwords anywhere. And with a password manager, that's a lot easier to keep up. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please?
Sorry, I was trying to read one other question from the chat. Muted.
No
from David asked, I have blocked YouTube in my personal firewall. Why does Google then no longer load and require a DNS resolver? Ooh, that's a tough question.
So that's a complicated question, but the core of it is Google owns YouTube, and by blocking YouTube, you're blocking Google in a lot of ways. Also, Google goes to great lengths to make YouTube available through Akamai and load distribution and such. So even if you're blocking youtube.com, that doesn't mean that the rest of the site isn't accessible, because that's just the front page. The videos are loaded under different URLs and different addresses, and it's a content distribution network, not just a web page. So it's a very difficult thing to block with a simple block like that. If you want to shoot me an email at the end of this, we can have a further discussion on that, because I do work with people who do this stuff, and I can pick their brains on it. Okay, so patches. Again, patch your stuff. You know, I know it's annoying. I hate rebooting my things. I hate stopping what I'm doing to apply the patch. But there have been significant cases over the last 3 years of ransomware and malware outbreaks that would not have happened if people had just patched and updated their computers. I don't know if you heard about WannaCry, but it was a very large ransomware campaign that could have taken down the internet. Fortunately, one person reverse engineered it and figured out a way to turn it off. But it was abusing a vulnerability that had existed in Windows since Windows XP, which, for those of you who want a nerd like me, Windows XP came out in 2002 or 2003, and is far out of date. The vulnerability had been patched in every subsequent version of Windows, but for backwards compatibility, people just left that functionality on, which caused massive problems for lots of people. Maersk Shipping actually had to shut down their entire business for 3 months because of this. So, you know, apply your patches. Windows will do it for you at night while you're asleep. And you just have to log in the morning, and even most of the applications, if you left them open, will be back when you're done. Mac OS is very similar. It will reopen your apps. It will apply overnight. You can schedule it to do it 2 in the morning. It's as uninvasive as possible. And you know, we talked about IoT earlier. This does include the other things you have on your network. So if you do use a smart television, make sure that you've got the update stuff turned on, because those things can be messy if they get compromised. Printers, cameras, blenders, I mentioned that earlier, right? And I skipped over point 2, but this includes the software you have on your computer. If you've got this one version of, I don't know, I'll pick on QuickBooks that you bought 15 years ago and you're still using it because you paid for it and it's yours. Well, if that has any sort of networking built in, and QuickBooks will talk to a bank, so it's got networking in it, it's got a vulnerability. And if it's not up to date, that can be used against you. So, you know, just try to keep everything current. I know software is expensive, but you know, the cost of having to recover from something like that is often a lot more expensive. Okay, next slide, please. And then we get to prevention. This first point is a little hard, but consider the implications of the software before installing it. I'm picking on Grammarly here because I think it's a terrible idea. If you're not familiar with it, Grammarly offers a plugin to your word processing software, and you know, both locally like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, where they will provide you instant feedback on your grammar. You used the wrong there in this sentence, or you left a dangling participle. Maybe you should change this, right? Participle isn't a word, Sean. You know, it does that in real time, similar to spell check. But for it to do that, it's capturing every single character you type, sending it to their server, running it through an algorithm, and sending you your information back. So everything you've typed into that document, Grammarly now has a copy of. I'm not speaking for everybody, but I personally am not, I'm not a fan of that. Granted, I did this presentation in Google Slides. Google has a copy of everything I typed throughout the whole thing, typos and all, but I knew that when I was using it. Tools like Norton LifeLock will scan your information, scan the internet looking for your personal information. So it checks known sites where people will post compromised information. It'll alert you that, hey, somebody's got your social security number and is trying to sell it on the dark web. The implications of that are Norton LifeLock now has my social security number, and they might be the ones that get breached next, and it's their data that's being sold on the darknet. It's up to you. There's good and bad on both sides. Just, my point is think through it and try and understand the implications of what the software will do. And then, I know I already talked about updates, but use a modern web browser. I prefer to use Brave, which is a port of Google Chrome. If you can use whichever web browser you like, but there's an add-in or an extension for all of them called AdBlock Plus, which is built by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Now, I just said earlier, think through the implications of this, and this is an example of that. Whenever I type in a URL, AdBlock Plus records that, and then all the traffic that goes through that web page goes through their proxy server, and anything that's an ad server or privacy problem, they block it. The implications of that are that the Electronic Frontier Foundation is getting a copy of all of my internet traffic from that web browser. I'm comfortable with that. I've thought through that. I know what I'm sending to them and what I'm not, and I don't want to see ads on my news sites. So I'm comfortable with sharing that information with the EFF. And then this is a screenshot actually from my my web browser, Brave. When it opens, its default page gives you some nice numbers. It's blocked 63,000 trackers and ads, saved me 2 gigs of bandwidth and 53 minutes of browsing time since it had been installed on that computer. So I see a comment here about antivirus. I am not going to pick or recommend an antivirus. I am going to say pick a reputable one. PC Mag, the general tech websites, do a review every year of the antivirus stuff. If you've never heard of it and it doesn't cost money, it's not a good idea. There was a disclosure I got today of a Chinese antivirus company that was actually run by a cybercrime gang. So the product had been on the market for 5 years. So they were using their own antivirus as a tool to compromise computers. So I'm not going to advocate for a specific product, but antivirus is one of those things that you definitely get what you pay for. Okay, next slide, please. And that's that. I thought I was close. So thank you. I appreciate everybody's attention and your comments. You can find me on Twitter at DorkVader. That's actually a 0, not an O. This is my personal email address. It got formatted bad at the end and I missed that. I'm sorry, but it is spmckeever@gmail.com. Just a personal note, my name is intentionally misspelled in Zoom. So my last name has no A in it. But please, if you have questions, whether or not you ask them now or you think of them later, shoot me an email. I'll help you where I can, and if I can't, I'll know somebody who does, or at least a direction I can point you in to get what you need.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean. This is so helpful. I know I learned a lot of things tonight. There's one other thing I'm going to just share at the it's not the district level, but our tech integration specialist, Lauren Villaluz, one site she recommends that I'll be sending out with Sean's presentation and the recording of this is commonsensemedia.org. I'm going to type it into the chat here. And that is another great resource for parents. And this is if you're looking, Sean was speaking more to the personal safety, home security safety, and then also how, like I loved your point, Sean, on, just having my kids on their devices same space as me, right? So that I'm more aware of what's going on and listening in. But commonsensemedia.org will look at, there's like Roblox, like parents need to know this about Roblox. Parents need to know this about Fortnite. And so they've got some webinars that parents can do. So I'll send that out with Sean's presentation and the video of this recording as well. So lots of thank yous in the chat, Mr. McKeever. Very, very thankful. Are there any final questions for him at this time? Okay, looks good. All right. Oh, there we have from Liz. Do you recommend a router with parent tools?
I don't, because I have problems with all of them. So full disclosure, I don't run a common router. I buy Netgear products, but I flash them to custom firmware. I recognize that not everybody can or is willing to do that. But I have a very specific use case for all my stuff, so I've not looked into parental controls. I'm honestly against it. I don't like relying on technology for some of that stuff, for that kind of stuff. I want to be more engaged in what my kids are doing. So I know that there are routers out there. Apple used to make routers and they had those controls in them. They don't make them anymore. But if you shoot me an email, I will do a quick search and see what I can come up with for you.
Okay. Yep, she followed up with it. Seems like one of the only ways to get around the district to block stuff. So maybe if Liz, if you could follow up with Sean, that would be great. David, you had a question?
Yes, my question is that, Sean, you said that you run a personal software. Would that happen to be WRT by chance?
It is DDWRT, yes.
Okay. I'm just curious on that. I'm an IT admin as well. I've done networking for about 15 years, so security is not my strongest point, but I know quite a bit of it. I was also asking the question with the Google because I did block YouTube. I do have a personal firewall, and of course it did cause the issue to block all the Google services where the kids couldn't even log into their Chromebooks anymore.
Yeah, because Google bundles it all together. And a quick plug for DDWRT, I had that up at DEF CON, which is the most hostile Wi-Fi environment in the world, and it stayed up for 3 days. So
okay,
it's solid.
Okay. I would definitely like to connect with you on an IT level. So we'll definitely, I'll get your email address and I'll send you an email.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thank you.
You guys could also type those letters into the chat for those that DW, I didn't get it all. So if you don't mind adding that to the chat, David, that would be great. Erin has said she's also switched to a different browser since the school controls Chrome. She's found that if you use another browser, sometimes you can have a little bit more control. And then she had a question. I'm curious what other parents are doing for YouTube as teachers use YouTube videos a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just share my experience. My son is on the other side of the room from me when he's in class. I know not everybody can do that, but that's how I try and keep him on task and stay on track of what he's doing. We do occasionally have to use headphones because we're both in sessions at the same time, so it's not 100%. But I've also told him very sternly that he's not to do that, and if he does, he loses access to his technology afterwards. So, you know, I've tried to set those ground rules, and he's been at least following that one pretty closely. So.
And Erin, in the follow-up email I'm going to send with a couple of the other questions to Aubrey and Lauren. I have a question. We do have to, like, when we post videos, they have to be ones approved by Ferndale schools on our teacher end. So I'm wondering, though, if that doesn't help with the sidebar or the recommended videos in YouTube. So I will, that's what I'll follow up on, because you can only send them if they're approved, but then it might not actually help with those recommended videos pieces that come around. So, okay, any other questions? We're heading right towards 7 o'clock, so. Oh, thank you, David. DD-WRT. Okay, got it. Okay, well, Sean, we're so thankful for you hosting this first session. This is our first time, again, doing a parent university in about 3 years, and we've got a series coming up for the rest of the semester. So it was a great first run, and while you have your kids at home, and a great model for the multitasking, amazing parents. So we are very, very thankful.
I have a very understanding boss.
All right, well, that's it then. We thank everybody. I'm going to end the recording here. And again, you have McKeever's email there, and I will send everything out. So So,
Thank you very much for setting this up tonight. Thank you, everybody, for
Thank you.
joining.